Okay, Anne, thanks for joining me at my virtual fireside, which
Thank you for
is
having me.
as a result of COVID and time, we can all work with virtual things and joining in this fireside chat. I'm not going to do much about introducing you, rather than to just say that your current position is staff program manager at Saleloft.
Yeah.
And I'd like you to sort of fill in all the rest. We talk about QA managers doing QA, but it's not something which I would have thought of as something, when you're a kid, you sort of grow up and say, when I grow up, I want to be a QA manager, in the same
Yeah.
way as you might say, I want to be an astronaut or I want to be a pilot or even a train driver. So, where
Very
does
true.
it come from and how did you get to be where you are today?
So my background started, I've been in QA literally since I graduated from college. It was my first tech job out of school. It was a contract position with a telecom company, testing some of their software and code like phone cards and just some weird stuff, honestly. And then I grew from there. I moved from company to company of all sizes and shapes in terms of like NCR, Cisco, small startups, all the above, from doing the testing, becoming testing lead into management, and then back into some more of the testing stuff, and then back into management again. And now I'm kind of leading the whole quality strategy at Salesoft. So it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, and sort of gradually growing up, going through the stages. Because quite often we have people who write to us and say, how do I get into testing? Because it's my chosen career to do QA management. Can you give us some advice? And of course, we sell test management software, but we don't work so much with the development of QA testers. I went through it myself as well, and I sort of came into QA through the back door. I was looking for a high check job when I first moved here, and
Yeah.
somebody put me in touch with a company, funnily enough, also in telecom. I was
Mhm.
also working in telecom as my
Interesting.
first position. And we developed the Skype phone, the original Skype phone.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I was
Back
working
in the
at
days
Cisco.
when data was very expensive and phone minutes were cheap.
Absolutely. I was at Cisco when the first like voice over IP phone thing
Mhm.
was existed. I remember getting one of those at my desk and being like so excited about it, thinking it was the coolest thing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so QA, it's not something you go to school for necessarily. Like you said, you don't just wake up and think, oh, I'm going to be a QA engineer or tester
Mhm.
or automation engineer. You have to have that QA brain. So like very detail oriented, very process oriented, understanding, being curious is like a huge part of
Yeah.
it.
Mhm.
Um, and then you grow your technical skills while you're doing that. So you become more of a, engineering part of the QA part as opposed to just testing software and clicking buttons and
Mhm.
saying something passed or not. There's a lot of different avenues you can take, but not everybody's built to be a QA engineer.
Mhm. Yeah,
Can't you
I
just
think you need
say,
to sort of be able to, we talk about white box testing, black box testing. And even if you're doing black box testing, I think you need to have some idea of what's going on behind the scenes to be able to develop a good testing strategy.
yeah, absolutely. You have to know how to read the requirements and
Mhm.
understand and have a full, grasp on the product itself
Mhm.
from beginning to end. So you can think of those risk factors and those different edge cases and things to think about while you're doing the testing or guiding a team through to test how to test something.
Yeah, it's something which you, of course, when you're a team leader and becoming a manager, that's one of the skills which you have to start thinking about. Whereas as just an ordinary tester, it gets a bit robotic and iterative, and you're just doing what
Yeah.
you're told.
Yeah, it can. It's hard to put on paper exactly what a QA engineer does because they do a lot. They do a lot more than people may think when they hear that term. Um, yes, they're testing, but they're also thinking, 5 steps ahead, 10 steps ahead. They read a document of, we're going to create this new feature. And then they're like, oh, but what about this? And the user is
Yeah.
probably not going to like
Mhm.
that way of doing it. Why don't we think about this, too?
Yeah.
And they are involved really early in the process, and
Yeah.
it's not just at the very end anymore. So it's
Yeah.
evolved a lot.
It's funny, that sort of idea of the mindset of thinking out of the box, thinking of use cases. Is this use
Mhm.
case going to be good for the user or not? Is going slightly beyond what you would have thought was the traditional role, but it goes into my role. And that's actually how I transitioned into my role in this relatively new field of customer success, because I was doing QA and support. And I
Yep.
was supporting a particular customer, and they were saying, well, I want feature X. And I would say, but have you thought of the implications of feature X? Because in another area of your software, you're doing something which might contradict feature X. And therefore, how are you going to resolve these two issues? And let's think about it and work around and try and work out what are going to be the results of this. And
Right.
that's something where you start thinking about the customer beyond what they've thought of themselves, and you become very proactive. And it
Absolutely.
goes into the customer success range where you're trying to work with customers to work out their roadmaps and what they want from the system.
Yeah. That's a neat transition that you made. We've been talking a lot about that here at Saleloft recently within our departments, just, how to transition from QA to another role if they're interested in how and what that looks like. And customer success has come up in that discussion. Some people have shown that interest, and then some people, are going completely the other way and want to be the software engineer.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's a neat progression that you had. I like it. I might think about
Yeah, it's a sort of a fascinating way that you sort of develop from one thing into another. You sort of
Mhm.
get your foot into the high tech sector. We'll talk about this a bit more later on, because the reason why I actually, rather than going into customer success, why I actually left QA. And I think test management software might have actually, if we'd have had it, it might have actually changed my view. And maybe I'd still be doing QA now. But
Yeah.
where did you first come across test management software?
Um, I would say somewhere mid 2000s, there was some free, very, very bare minimum
Mhm.
places where you could go and write your what not being in an Excel spreadsheet anymore. So we graduated from there into very basic test cases,
Mhm.
steps, expected results, pass, fail. That was it.
Right.
Right.
So
There were
did you set up the database yourself, or it was something which was sort of
um
open source?
it was an open source. I'm blanking on the name of it because that was a long time ago for me.
Right.
But there were multiple ones coming out,
Mhm.
around the same time Selenium was being born, and
Right.
automation was becoming a bigger thing. But to have something like PractiTest with all of its customizable pieces to it, the way you can filter and reports, like have all of these things in one place, that's what led us to making this decision. Because sure, write it down, we need to write it, but honestly, no one loves writing a test case. I mean, you can probably speak for it too, as being a QA. That's not the best part and the most favorite part of the job. Thinking about it as doing it, but
Yeah.
having that avenue and tool that makes sense and helps you do it is
Mhm.
key. Because if you hate the tool, you're not going to do the work. And we
Right.
have to have test cases written for multiple
Mhm.
reasons.
Yeah,
So
of
yeah.
course. So so you got to a point where you said, I need to have a more professional test management system. And presumably then you started a procurement process. What
Yes.
what were you specifically looking for, and how did PractiTest come to win that procurement process?
So when I got to Salesoft almost 4 years ago, they were still using Excel spreadsheets for test cases. So that was a big, whoa, we need to, graduate into something that's a little bit
Right.
more efficient, and effective. And, you know, PractiTest to me stood out the most because it had reporting capabilities, it had Jira integration capabilities, and the fact that you could reuse tests over and over again. I really like the test sets. So we do swarms here, which are basically regression suites. And you can create a test set with the exact same test over and run that same thing over and over again. without having to create a new test set every single time. You can see the progress as you're going through it. You can rerun and rerun and rerun. You can click bug and Jira opens a bug for you. It's all of that came into play with our decision big time.
Yeah, so when you mentioned click bug and you click the fail and issue button and it produces a bug, that I think may be one of the main reasons why I went out of QA. Because
Really?
go back to the old days and you're in the middle of testing, you test something and something goes wrong. You then have to put aside whatever you're testing. You have to start writing up the bug line by line, remembering what you did. Did I do it exactly in line with the test steps, which are somewhere in an Excel document, or was I running on autopilot? So you go through and you manually, and it takes you 5-10 minutes to write up that bug, during which time your mind has lost track of what it was doing and the stage of testing and all the excitement from testing, and it's been replaced with, oh no, I have to write up this bug. And then, of course, when you've submitted it, what's the next thing which happens? The developers come back to you and say, you must have written it up wrong because we can't reproduce it.
Right. It didn't do that on my machine.
Exactly.
Passwords.
Yeah. So that was one of the things that really frustrated me about testing. And, having to stop what I was enjoying doing, the actual test itself, go and write up a bug. And every time it came into my mind, oh, do I really have to write this up? And of course, yes, you do. You do, because, and then, of course, you need documentation for it. You can't hit a fail without writing up a bug in many companies. The rule is that if anything fails, you have to write it up as a bug. Whether it's a new bug or linked to an existing bug, it has to exist in the system.
Exactly. And having that integration, a lot of companies use Jira, and that's been a savior for us. So just made it so much easier to not have to go from tool to tool, because we can see it all in the PractiTest test. And then you can also see the PractiTest test information in the Jira. So it's a great enhanced tool, I guess I would say, for test case management. I don't know how many other companies do it that way, but I really like that here.
Yeah, it's something that we really feel is important, and we've pushed the Jira integration, a huge amount, because we want to be able to have the people who are meant to be using Jira happily. So your project managers and your developers, we're not trying to get them to go into PractiTest and to give up Jira, because it's the tool that works best for them and they love it. And so what we've done is to build with the integration something which allows them to get a peek into the testing world without having to have PractiTest licenses or go into PractiTest themselves. But they get a peek of the testing world. So your project managers can look at their requirements and see, are they being tested yet? Have any test cases been added to them? If they have been added, what's the stage of testing? Are they failing or passing, or are they still at the no run stage? If they've all passed, then I know that I'm expecting to hear from my test manager that their requirement, their user story, whatever it is approaching being mature and ready for me to release it. And they can see that without needing to go into PractiTest. Similarly, developers, they're working in Jira. We don't need them to be forced to go into PractiTest if PractiTest isn't being used as an all-in-one solution for them. And so they're able to look at what's going on in Jira, add notes to the information in Jira, and then they can, working within Jira, know that their testers are going to do their retests as necessary within PractiTest. And then they can see from the sync going backwards and forwards and comments which have been written by the testers that now the testing is complete and their role is complete, or else they have to go back and do some more development work, because PractiTest can update for that as well.
Exactly. And also, knowing whether you need to update the test case itself. The test is totally wrong, or you miss something and you need to add something to it. It makes it just so much easier to have that together.
So is that one of the biggest benefits of using PractiTest, or were there other ones, or were they what you expected or not what you expected?
Yeah, no, it's totally what we expected. And having that, and then using the dashboards and the reporting
Mhm.
Makes it easy for me to report metrics back up to, the higher ups who want numbers on how we're doing with coverage and, where we are with swarms, like big swarms. So we're just finished upgrading Ruby across our entire platform. And
Wow.
that's big, it's huge.
Yeah.
So it required a lot of testing. Pretty much, I think we probably tested 3,000 test cases that we had written in PractiTest. And being able to just point the people who were curious of the status, instead of me having to manually do it every day, I just pointed them to a dashboard and said, here's where we are. You can click
Mhm.
on it. You see a pretty graph of where our, percentage complete is, what's blocked, what's passed, what's failed, and how we're doing in our timeline.
Right. Okay. So that gives me an idea of your expected results, so to speak. What about the unexpected results? Were there things in PractiTest that you were never looking for, but suddenly they popped up and you said, yes, I've got what I expected out of PractiTest, but here's something which has been an extra bit of value, which I'd never expected.
Yeah, so some of that for me, I think was, sorry, there's sirens going off. It's really loud right here. I'm just blanked on my thought. Unexpected things. So the Jira stuff, along with it being able to report out. So the reporting was huge.
Right.
The graphs and the dashboards and being able to really show that. A lot of the tools did not do that before. I like that we can clone tests and test sets to different projects. That is my most unexpected hero of PractiTest. We're using a third party to help us with our automation testing. And so
Right.
we are passing our PractiTest test to them in their own project. So they don't have access to all of Saleloft's goodies. But what we need them to automate, we didn't have, it was that simple. It was just cloning those tests over, and they open and they are writing tests based on that. It was seamless. I didn't have to do copy pastes and really figure out which tests we wanted to go with, because I was able to filter what I wanted, clone it, and put it in their project. Easy. It was great.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, that being able to clone across when you have a new third-party supplier or a new third-party person who you're working with, that you could
Right.
just take the batch of tests and move them across into somebody else's project. And of course, the projects in PractiTest are very discrete. So you can allow your suppliers or vendors into the particular project and they have no idea about what's going on anywhere else in the system.
Yeah, the customizations and the permissions customizations is really helpful too, because you can really truly narrow down who sees what and who has access to do what within the product. And that can be important for a number of different reasons, whether it's security or, just license usage. So I really like that part too.
Yeah, we actually have some customers who have gone even further, and especially if they're testing ERP systems,
Mm,
then when it comes to the financial side of the ERP system, they need to use live data of employment records and things like that. And
yeah.
you don't want even most of your testers seeing that. So what
Nope.
they do is they move that financial side into a separate discrete project, which they only allow the testers who are cleared to see that particular
Right.
data. They
Right.
let them just into that project and keep it separate from everything else.
Makes sense. I love that. That's
Yeah.
not many, if any, other tools can do that. I am sure of it.
Mhm. So that's sort of become sort of one of our gold standards, being able to allow the information to be set into whoever's project needs it. And we're now just moving further with a new feature, which you may not have come across yet. And that is that being able to see the parent test case, which has been cloned from. So you can get
Oh,
information about the parent test case and see whether it's been updated or not. Now, you need a
that's a
corporate
huge
license to
benefit.
be able to actually hit the update button, but you can still, in any license, see if that change has taken place.
That is definitely something I will need to be looking into. Stat.
Yeah.
Love that. And I love
We're always trying to
milestones to it.
improve to help you.
I know, it's great. And I've been playing around with the new milestones
Mhm.
feature. That is another, I think it displays really well so far that I haven't looked at it intensely yet. I will be honest, but now that I kind of understand better what it's for, it's perfect
Mm.
for like our swarms, like easy for our
Right.
VPs to just go and peek in and be like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, we're here. Okay, good. We're doing this. And I love it.
Yeah.
It's a good addition for sure.
Another nice thing which you could do for VPs, C-level executives, etc., is to be able to, of course, be able to take out either the dashboard items or whole dashboards tabs, and then you can either embed them or share links to dashboards
Yes.
in real time as iframes for an embedment, or the link, you can do an external dashboard link so that
Yes.
they can see the
I
external
have used
dashboards.
that feature for many presentations
Mhm.
and the guild newsletter that I put out monthly. I've been inserting those links as well. So yeah, I love that.
Right. Okay, so as we sort of move on from PractiTest, looking at the future of the world,
Oh
how
goodness.
do you feel that automation's going to affect you? You've mentioned already that you've done a bit of automation here and there, brought it in, and processes have been affected by automation. Do you
Mm.
think it's something which is going to not necessarily take over all testing? Because I think we probably agree that you'll always have to do some manual testing, even if
Yeah.
it's just to validate the automation and make sure
Yes.
that the automation is doing its job. But do you feel that and I sort of see this in the testing world, especially looking at testing jobs and people who
Mhm.
we work with who are testers, there's more and more of a requirement to be able to do things like scripting and be
Yeah.
able to do coding in automation.
Yes. So we are actually in that phase here at Saleloft. We had a team that was fully manual and either very little or minimal scripting experience. In the past year and a half, we have been focusing on shifting left, which includes
Mhm.
automating and testing faster, sooner, earlier. And a part of that has been creating more of a hybrid QA role where they
Mhm.
are doing both manual and some scripting. Um, I don't think it's ever going to go away. I think it's just going to evolve more and more. Um, but I'm total agreement that there will absolutely always be the need for some manual intervention there as well. But automation, I remember when it first kind of came out and was the new big thing, and it hasn't slowed down at all.
Yeah.
They're making it easier, they're making it more um, available to everyone,
Mhm.
and it's not going anywhere. I'm excited about it. It's just interesting having come from, you know, back in the 90s to
Mhm.
now. It's grown and changed so much, testing in general,
Yeah.
but automation is here to stay for sure.
Yeah, I remember talking to somebody who was involved in the old COBOL days,
Oh
and
yeah.
machine code, writing in machine code, and to be able to write automated tests for something like that, the only person who could write the test was the person who actually developed it in the first place.
Exactly. 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 It wasn't really, yeah, it just hadn't evolved that way yet. It took a long time for it to kind of make sense, I guess, in the industry
Mm.
fully, that this is actually a good thing. It doesn't have to be a human all the time.
Yeah.
Like these
Mm.
repetitive tasks, like how can we be more efficient? Like, oh,
Yeah.
well, we can write this code to make this thing do this, that
Mm.
for us. We don't have to do it. So,
Yeah. I suppose one of the things which has held people back to an extent is that if you're going to write a whole load of code to do something, depending on the effort in writing the code, and then how long it's going to work for the test before
yep,
either the code degrades or
right.
gets superseded, or else if you're testing something like a UI, then the UI button moves somewhere and it fails because it's in the wrong place now.
Yep. Those are the tricky ones. The end-to-end UI tests are obviously the most fragile. We're focusing on getting those API integration level tests done. earlier in the process. Obviously, unit testing exists and that'll never
Yeah.
go away, but getting to find things earlier without a UI, and then
Yeah.
by the time we get to the UI, we're okay. We're gonna try and keep things as they are, but of course it will change. And we are aware that those are fragile, and we've outsourced that work, so it's not on our team, so we can
Right.
focus on more of the things earlier in the process.
So are you getting developers to test more as part of the shift left?
We absolutely are.
Right.
So it's a whole
And more, of course, than just unit
thing.
testing.
Right. No, they're going to be writing some of the integration testing. The QAEs are going to learn and help so that they can do that. They'll be identifying, all the different areas and be able to focus more on exploratory testing and edge case testing, things that you don't necessarily get from reading a requirements doc or, a new feature description. That's the QA brain, right? They're going to think out and think of all
That's interesting, because when you're talking about risk management, when you're having to do everything manually, then you have to lower the risk threshold and say that it's only for very high risk thresholds that I'm going to test. But if you've got automation in the background, then you can allow your manual testers to do the lower risk testing, which may be something which, yes, it's going to have a high impact, but it's something which we very rarely expect to happen.
Exactly. So we're trying to get as much of our regression suite automated so that we don't have to continue having these swarms that take days. We can click a button and it'll take an hour or less even to get through those. So it's very important, but we're also trying to really emphasize the need and the value of having QA engineers on premise doing the work, helping the teams through quality. So it's not just that they're testing, but they're, required to understand the quality of everything even more, which is, I think, how agile and shifting left is evolving.
Yeah. And then, of course, on the other side, the shift right as well. Presumably you're doing some of that as well, because the two balance against each other.
Yeah, well, we are CI/CD, like we are deploying multiple times a day to production code all the time. We try and do some right on the right end, but most of it is done on the left.
Right.
For now, it's going to evolve again. Like I said, we're running a set of tests of our regression test right before we release code to production. So we have a bunch of pieces of code kind of bundled up. It could be 10 different things, PRs, and then they get run through that entire regression suite. And then it's like, okay, if they pass, then they get merged.
Yeah.
That's our right side right now.
Right. Okay, and linked to that, of course, AI. That's the big word of the moment.
That is the buzzword.
Yeah. Do you see a lot? Obviously, everyone sees some AI going into every field. Do you see it, though, becoming a large part of a QA's engineer's life, sharing his thoughts and actions with an AI system, or you think it will have a minimal context?
I'm in between. I think it's going to be a while before it like really has a massive impact on how we test. I'm sorry, but a computer is not a human, and they can't think like us. I mean, we can feed the information, sure, but they're still not able to really think like we do.
You don't have to apologize to me. You
So,
don't.
I think it can be very helpful in different ways for QAs and developers. It can help write test cases. It can help just be more clear and stuff. It can, summarize things so easily, and I can do a lot more than that, obviously, too. But as far as testing, it's not, no. Automation is there, and no.
So you think a good QA engineer is safe for at least the next few years anyway?
I do. I truly do. I just don't think it's that I mean, no, I just don't think it can. Like it would be able to take over a developer's role before then, because developers, it's code and it has to be this way or that way, right?
That's an interesting one, because if we're talking about automation testing, then possibly it might be able to help manual QA engineers who aren't so experienced in writing code. It might be able to help them to write the code to do their testing.
Exactly. And we've actually encouraged that, like
Mhm.
use AI to help you learn how to do some of the scripting and learning new code ways of doing things. But we're definitely not letting it take over what they're doing. I mean,
Yeah.
Saleloft, we're the very first, AI powered revenue orchestration platform.
Yeah.
So like, we're using AI within our tool. It is
Mhm.
not lost on any of us that it's
Yeah.
available, but within our industry and what we're doing with testing and quality, it's going to evolve. It's going to take
Right.
time.
Mhm. Yeah, because we've started to use AI a little bit in PractiTest as well.
Yeah.
And we're exactly what you said. We're using it to help us write test cases.
Yeah. And I
And
mean, it's
it's
great.
actually amazing what it could do. If you write a reasonably clear and coherent description and a name to it, it will then go and spit out a whole load of steps for you, almost as if you thought of it yourself. And I actually put it to somebody and said, let's try this together. And
Yeah.
they put in what they wanted to have as their test case. And we went through it together, and they said, ooh, this is quite good. It's given me some, I'd have thought of 3 of these options, but the other
Yep.
2 I might not have thought of. And
Exactly.
I think
And
that's
that's
where
the
its power
difference
is.
too. So the person could be thinking of the 2 things that AI hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a joint.
And I think that's where it comes in, to be able to share ideas, as it were,
Mhm.
so that you can have your ideas, but there will be things, inevitably, being a human, will do certain things very well and will miss out on other spots. We're detail oriented automatically, being in QA, but there are still going to be some gaps here and there because we are just
Right.
human. But
Yeah.
the AI can then share with us what it thought of, and it may think of 10% that we hadn't thought of, and we
Exactly.
might have thought of 20% which it hadn't thought of. And then when you combine the 2 sets of resources together, then you get the best of all worlds.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that's great. It's exciting.
Yeah.
Very exciting. And nerve-wracking, but very exciting.
So we are terrified of where it's going to go, but I think at least for the next few years, as you said, I think that it's a learning curve,
Mhm.
and it's learning frighteningly fast. But it's a matter
Yeah.
of making sure that it gives us the best rather than trying to take control of us in the process.
Yeah.
It,
Exactly.
it is, at the end of the day, as we say, it's a tool,
It's
and
a tool.
you need to control the tool rather than the tool controlling you.
Exactly. Exactly. Like I know some industries, some people, places, whatever, are going to start relying solely on AI. And maybe that's okay in certain areas of the world and life and things, but not in technology, not in software
Yeah,
development.
just as long as it's not your car or your aeroplane, as some people have suggested.
We're going back to the Jetsons era, coming into that
Oh
finally.
gosh, yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and HAL and Space Odyssey and all of those things, making
Yep.
sure that the AI doesn't take over,
Yep.
and because it doesn't have the same thrust for our safety and security as we do.
No, it can't. It can't. It doesn't have.
I remember that's still what they always talk about when you talk about either pilotless planes or automation running your planes. Your automation doesn't have a will to live. And then the question says, well, what about if you put the pilot on the ground? For example, all planes operate as drones.
Yeah.
Again, does your pilot still have that will to live if he knows that he's got the lives of 300 people, but
Right.
he's on the ground now rather than being actually in the air?
Yep.
And something that we have to
Changes.
sort of grapple with and work with to work out whether these things are actually something which is acceptable and an acceptable risk or not.
Right. Right. I agree.
But there's one thing which is certain, and that is that we're living in exciting times.
We are ever changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on that note, I just want to thank you, Anne, for taking part in this fireside chat. You've given us
Absolutely.
such great insights.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was fun. It's always nice to speak with you, Antony.
Oh, thank you.